So, to present the first paper session by the name of Bullying, Victimization, and Correlations with Implementation of the KiVa Program in Elementary and Middle Schools. And instead of Miia Sainio, I have Miia Sainio. Welcome.
Okay. Thank you. So, good afternoon. So, Silja Saarento unfortunately could not join today, so I'm trying my best to explain her story. And in this study, we are looking at the correlations of KiVa program with how victimization and bullying are related to implementing the program. And first, I will just shortly introduce the KiVa program very shortly. So KiVa comes from acronym of kiusaamista vastaan, which means in English against bullying. But KiVa is also means nice in Finnish, so nice school. KiVa school is nice school, or KiVa friend, KiVa ystävä is KiVa friend. So the KiVa program development started 2006. So we've been going on now about 10 years. It was funded by the Finnish Ministry of Education and Culture. Between 2007 and 2009, we had 2 years of chance to examine the program effects in randomized control trial, in which we had half of the schools using the KiVa program, the first materials that we created, and then half of the schools were not using KiVa, but they continued their previous practices, but they didn't have the KiVa program or training at their use. And from the 2009, we have been able to disseminate KiVa program in whole Finland, so that during the first 3 years, all Finnish schools could register for free to use the program. And since then, some schools have been registering. And by 2016, we have had more than 90% of Finnish schools registered as program users. So almost whole Finland is covered. And now KiVa is also going abroad. So we have about 14 countries now using KiVa, either piloting it or using it as their actual practice against bullying. The KiVa program is basically an anti-bullying program which has a very solid theory background. So Professor Salmivalli had been studying bystanders' effects already 96 or 90s overall, and finding with the findings that it's the key factor to influence bullying are the bystanders within the group. So we need to motivate other students in the classroom to stand against bullying, and that could be the key to successful implementation of success in reducing victimization and bullying. KiVa program involves both universal actions and indicated actions. The universal actions are the ones that are considered to be preventive, to target it to all students in the schools. It can involve lessons to talk about what is bullying and how could we all stand against it. And also we need indicated actions. So the program involves a specific procedure to tackle bullying when it comes into attention. The program is a multi-component program. And I'm just showing the graph so that there is actually a workshop on Tuesday, 10:15, where the program is presented in more details. So this is just a short background of that. It does include different components that may be very important in anti-bullying work. Both preventive, interventive, and then monitoring its effects. When we studied KiVa program during the first 2 years in the randomized control trial, it seemed that it had very encouraging effects in reducing victimization and bullying. And Silja Saarento herself has done great studies in examining the mediation of the effects. So it seemed that KiVa influenced the attitudes of students. It also influences the bystander behaviors, in so that when students perceive that their classmates are behaving differently, for instance, defending more the victimized students, that changes when KiVa program is taken at use. But it also seems to influence teachers' attitudes towards bullying. And at least these aspects are the ones that seem to make the victimization and bullying to reduce. So there is some kind of mechanism how KiVa program takes its effects. It seems that the effects have not been so, they have been more prominent in the primary school level than in middle school level. So overall the effects have been stronger in primary school than in middle school. And there are some studies looking at the implementation during the randomized control trial. So that we know that if teachers are giving the lessons with more fidelity, it seems to reduce victimization more effectively. So it matters what teachers do, actually. So in this presentation, we are actually looking at the data from the large rollout when now we have the KiVa schools enrolled in from 2009 to 2016. So schools have been using it for 8 years, or some schools have, those who started 2009. And we want to know how the implementation is related to actual victimization and bullying percentages in the schools. So how we do it is that, So every year, schools are answering to surveys. So there are a student survey every spring that students are answering about the levels of bullying and victimization. Are you bullied? Are you victimized in the schools? But they are also asked about the implementation, whether they had KiVa lessons during the year, or whether they know that KiVa is used in their schools. The students are actually asked both about the outcomes, whether they are victims or bullies, and also about the implementation. We also have some data from the teacher surveys, but we have less data from teachers because they don't answer every year or as diligently as students. So now in this study, we used only the student data. So let's first look at the changes in bullying and victimization in Finnish schools between 2009 and 2016. Here we use the Olveus questionnaire. How often have you been bullied at the school in the last few months? Or how often have you bullied others during the past couple of months? And if they have been bullied 2 or 3 times a month, we have assigned them as victims or bullies. And this data is aggregated at the school level, so that we are looking actually at the school averages, the percentage of victims in the school, percentages of bullies in the school. And the data is rearranged so that I'm not now showing the trends from 2009 to 2016, but actually from the time when KiVa program was started. The baseline is the first year before the KiVa was started in the school, and the year 1 here is after the first year of implementing KiVa program. And we can see that we have a quite nice trend of victimization and bullying in Finnish schools who are registered as KiVa users and answering the questionnaire. And we can see that the reduction from the first year is most prominent. So there is a clear reduction of bullying, victimization and bullying. It continues, still it's continuous. We are now having actually this spring again a measurement, and we are always nervous to know, does it still continue? Do we have the chance to still go down? But when they take the KiVa program in use, it seems that that's the year what makes the most difference. So, but in this study, Silja has before presented already the overall trends correlates between the victimization and bullying and implementation. But actually, KiVa program is most intensively recommended to give in grades 1st, 4th, and 7. So there are some program components that are targeted to whole school from to each grade level. But then 1st, 4th, and 7th grades are given the KiVa lessons. So we could think that these time points are more important. So these grade levels could be more related to reductions of bullying than the others. And when we have look at the data from grade 4, it looks pretty much the same. There is a reduction. Some year, there is some exception from some years, but overall there seems to be a reduction for the grade 4 in victims and bullies. The reduction in bullies seems to be more steady. And when we look at the grade 7, the middle school, which is usually harder to tackle, it seems that we can see the reduction also here. Although it was not so evident from the randomized control trial, we see the reduction of victims and especially of the bullies. Something interesting here is that in middle school, the differences between victims and bullies is not so huge. So we have actually the same amount of victims and bullies to begin with, but we have been able to get the numbers down, especially for the bullying. But is the program implementation actually related to these numbers? So are the schools who implement more actually having better outcomes in victimization and bullying? Silja has looked at these questions before for all grade levels. And first of all, there is a clear trend that also implementation declines, which is a bit against the trend that victimization and bullying is declining, but also they seem to do less every year, the schools that have been answering the questionnaires. Silja has also found that students and teachers, they don't agree so much across the time. So first they seem to agree on implementation. So if we ask students whether you had lessons, and if we ask teachers whether they had lessons, they seem to correlate more in the beginning of when they start using KiVa, and this correlation actually goes down. So teachers and students do not agree after many years. And also it seems that when students report less implementation, it seems that teachers don't answer. So we can see also a selection effect. So answering may be related to not implementing so intensively. Silja also found that associations between bullying and victimization and implementation tend to vary across years. So there is not something that is every year the same, but it actually varies. And there is a stronger association for the first years of using KiVa. In this study, we used the students' reports to examine the association between implementation and victimization and bullying. And we used the awareness of KiVa as one variable, which is when we ask students whether your school is KiVa school, whether your school is using this anti-bullying program to reduce bullying. Another question is whether you had KiVa lessons during the past years, and students could answer yes or no. And whether they have been playing the KiVa online games, and also whether the students have been aware of that they have a KiVa team in the schools whose responsibility is to address the cases of bullying that come into attention. So we are now using 4 implementation variables in this graphs. And now I will show you the 4th grade graphs first. So these are correlations. 0 correlation is here, which means that there is no association between implementing the program as perceived by students and victimization and bullying. And it would be here. And here are the KiVa years. So this would be after the first year of implementing KiVa and its association with victimization and bullying. And we can see that the associations are still modest. So implementing the program has modest effects across years with the victimization and bullying. They are about 10%, or some years it goes stronger and some years weaker. The strongest effects seem to be for the awareness. So if students are aware that KiVa school is used in their school, that tends to be correlated with victimization and bullying. They have less victimization and bullying if the students are aware of KiVa being used. the trends with victimization for the fourth grade look quite similar. Again, the awareness seems to be the strongest correlate across year, but of course there is again a lot of variation between years, so it's not every year the same. And for the other measures, it's not perhaps so strong. For the lessons, it's about 10%. Okay. For the 7th grade, the correlations are probably a bit even more modest. And also there is a variation so that it seems to be stronger in the beginning, then gets weaker, and then again gets stronger. So there is some kind of time trend here, and also for the victimization. So it seems that, okay. So it seems that really the victimization and bullying is decreasing in Finland every year, which we are very happy about. But we are not yet to know what really causes these decreases. And these studies show that there are some modest correlations with implementation. We know that if schools do something, it does make it's seen in the victimization and bullying prevalences. We can see yes, but we also see that it varies in different years, and yeah. I lost it. Yeah. But something that may be very important, that it's strongly correlated with the awareness, or not strongly, but modestly. So if students know that the KiVa school, they are the KiVa school, that seems to be very the strongest correlate, which may be because the students feel safe in the schools where they know that teachers are addressing the questions. So there are a lot of limitations also in this data, because we have a trend data, and one of the biggest problem when we look at the trend data is the selection effect. So actually the correlations are low, but they may be low because we have very little variations. The schools that answer to questionnaires, they tend to do more, probably. So those who quit or they reduce implementation, they don't answer the questionnaires. So we would really need schools, all schools to answer, to be able to really say that how the implementation is related to victimization and bullying. And also in this study we looked at the student responses, which is in a way better way to look at it, because then the students know what they have been doing, and that is seen in the reductions in victimization and bullying. But of course, for instance, all students may not know that they have had KiVa lessons. We know that schools at some point, they actually don't speak about that we have KiVa lessons, but they have lessons in which they may speak about bullying without mentioning KiVa. So that may be one reason why at the end the correlations actually get lower, that there is no longer so strong association with the implementation and victimization and bullying. So there is a really need to more studies to understand what in KiVa program makes it happen. So we would need to study actually the schools that are using KiVa program and those that are not using. And nowadays in Finland it's difficult because most schools have been at least introduced the program. So even if they are not registered as users, they may have taken some components at their use because teachers change schools. So even if we had the sample of schools that are not using KiVa, it may not be possible. So we actually would need to do another randomized controlled trial to look at the trend data and implementation, which components are related to reductions of victimization and bullying. Yes. So in this World Anti-Bullying Forum, we have actually more presentations about KiVa program. So if you're interested in KiVa program as a contents, there is a workshop on Tuesday where the program is explained. And then we have two presentations on Monday and Tuesdays when we go look at the implementation of KiVa program from a bit different angle. So welcome to hear those as well. Thank you. I think
is there anyone who has a question? Yeah? We have time for one, and then I'm going to introduce the next speaker.
What is the hypothesis for why students and teachers don't agree on implementation of KiVa later on? You know, you said that teachers said, oh yes, we're doing it, and students disagreed. What is the hypothesis for that?
Yes, I don't think I have a good answer. This is because Silja has done this presentation, and I know that I'm not sure if I can answer all the questions, but we know that teachers are not answering so diligently. And for instance, when we asked about lessons, they may be just one teacher in the school who is answering, who is doing the lessons, but the rest are not doing the lessons. But they are anyway answering the questionnaire. So it's really difficult to capture. We need more stringent setting to be able to look at the question. But of course, there could be, maybe one reason is that they don't speak about KiVa lessons anymore. They are having lessons about emotions, about group work, but they are not saying the word KiVa. And the students don't know that they have KiVa lessons. That could be one explanation. Student would probably agree more with the teachers. Was this the answer?
Okay, thank you so much, Miia.
Thank you.